going on, everybody? I know it's been a while, but it's good to be back, if even for a brief moment. But you may be asking, what brings me back now of all times? Well, sometimes you read a book that gives you an honest-to-God reading high that lasts for days, weeks, months, even longer than that, and Mason and Dixon was that book for me recently. I swear I went around touching all the books in my library for days after reading that final sentence, just pulling out all of the previous instances of those books that gave me that high before. It was really, really weird. I felt like a reading junkie. I also started buying a shit ton of books. We have a great used bookstore that I kept going to and getting more and more and more, even though we don't need any more in this house. And in fact, the day after I finished Mason and Dixon, I found a first edition hardcover that I knew I had to have. To put it succinctly, this is an incredible, hilarious, melancholic, adventurous novel that I absolutely recommend all reading, especially if you're an American. In other Pynchon novels that I've read, though they all capture the human spirit in their own way, none have had more heart than this. And if you think of any of the classic American works of literature, it wouldn't feel out of place to have Mason and Dixon on a pedestal nearby. Now, Thomas Pynchon is known for his postmodern masterpieces, and they're not always for everybody. In fact, one of the main complaints people have against postmodernism is that those stories often deconstruct reality in such a way that makes the story unbelievable or unrelatable. But that is remedied perfectly here with a framed narrative in which a reverend is in a room with his extended family on a cold winter's night, and he makes it a little bit warmer by telling them the story of the famous astronomer-surveyor duo, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, and it creates this epic tale for the rest of the book. Every instance of magical realism is just a byproduct of spicy storytelling that's catered to whoever's in the room at the time. If it's a younger audience, he'll make it a bit more exciting. If there's more of a prude crowd, he'll tone it down a little bit. And all along the way, you are carried on a journey of a world that's moving toward modernism, and you're getting a first-hand look, or sometimes second-hand look, maybe even third-hand look at the start of a very special friendship. Now, this novel can be difficult. It's written in 18th century English. Thomas Pynchon did a lot of research, as you could tell when you read on the dialect of that time. And sometimes it's hard to follow along with what's going on, especially at the beginning. But a lot of the language is so beautiful and a lot of the characters are so compelling that it does carry you along. And by the time you get to the middle of the book, and especially the end, you are so used to the language that it's not even a problem. And I think that it adds such a spice to the text because there's a lot of wordplay that Thomas Pynchon works with here that only works with this style of dialect. And I thought that it was so fun, especially among the different characters. They have different dialects among all of them, and it just adds such a fun atmosphere, especially when a lot of characters are together at once. You can really tell who's talking, even if it's not attributed to one person or another. I just think that the characters carrying those various styles of language is such a strong point for this book. So though it can be difficult, it's worth working through. The story can also be absolutely wild at times. Remember the frame narrative and that it is a story being told to a room full of people. It's not historically accurate all the way. There's going to be some insane moments that you're going to think, this can't have possibly happened. Well, no, it didn't, because that's the whole point. This reverend is trying to, first of all, earn his keep at this house as a guest here by entertaining the crowd, and he wants to make sure people are staying and having a good time. And so I think there was one particular moment where I was totally confused on what was going on. It seemed like I was reading one chapter, was absolutely understanding everything, and the next one I was completely lost, and I thought, this is just so silly that we've gone so far off the path. And then I got to the next chapter, and about halfway through that next one, you started to learn that two of the cousins that are in the room were interjecting their own story into the story of Mason and Dixon, and eventually the Reverend is able to tie it all together, and Mason and Dixon find their way into the story that has been injected here. And I just thought it was so funny that I thought it was such a weird diversion, but in fact there was a totally explainable phenomenon going on. And going along with the humor of the novel, I did think it was hilarious at times. I thought Dixon was so funny in the fact that he was not afraid of sharing his mind. Also from the fact that the Reverend's name was Wicks Cherry Coke, and so this story of early colonial America was brought to you by Cherry Coke. The characters are so endearing here as well. I mentioned Dixon a second ago for his humor, but he is also such a kind soul. He often associated with the undesirables of society, and this book doesn't shy away from talking about slavery in colonial America or the displacement of the native peoples of America. And I thought that that was such a good aspect here, that it isn't just glossing over those details, it's attacking them head on and showing both sides, because obviously there was no Civil War yet. In fact, there wasn't even a country yet. The United States of America was still a colony, or the 13 colonies of Great Britain. So having a main character that really is an advocate for those people in society was such a breath of fresh air when some of the other characters weren't quite that kind. Mason also struggles with the passing of his wife throughout the novel. It's a major theme and creates some really memorable scenes throughout the whole thing, and I thought that was such a humanizing aspect to somebody who was such a titan of what he was doing. He was chosen to go on this massive journey across the ocean by the Royal Astronomers Society to put this line down to get the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. And I think just having an aspect of a character where that's not getting to his head, there's something on his mind otherwise, was also really endearing. And just like any other Pynchon novel, there is a myriad of side characters, some of which you may know, like George Washington or Ben Franklin, some of which are just included for their specific chapters in the novel, and they each play such an important role of fleshing out this novel. You're really getting a sense of all of the different angles of colonial America, or even before that, you're spending some time in South Africa. You know, you see a lot of different parts of the globe because of certain side characters' backstories, and it really adds an aspect of fleshing out the entire world. It's not just America in the 1700s, it's the entire world, and them grappling with a very religious past and a scientific future that is coming closer and closer every day. I'm serious, the side characters really expand the novel beautifully. Just ride the ride if you feel like you're not getting to the main aspect of the story, which is the Mason and Dixon line. I don't think that it's important to focus on just the line here. Though it is Mason and Dixon's story, it's also the story, as I said, of 18th century colonial America. And even though it is also a story of 18th century colonial America, it is trying to look at the entire world and the different philosophies that are in various parts of the world. I just think that it's worth it if you feel like you're in a section that seems to be dragging, to ride it out. Oftentimes there will be something at the end that will hit you. There'll be a great profound statement to end the section. I found a bunch of those in this novel where I had to stop and breathe heavily, being like, wow, he's done it again. Pynchon just has such a way of really taking you out of your comfort zone, but leading you back in a way that is just perfect. That being said, though those worldly chapters are important and highly enjoyable, the bulk of this novel takes place in America. It's primarily an American story. And really, Mason and Dixon as a whole is a love letter to America. Not just the pristine America, the patriotic America, but the America that has flaws, that has a bloody past. You know, as I said, it tackles issues of slavery. It looks at the mistreatment of the native peoples of America and doesn't shy away from that, but also shows that there is opportunity in this country. It's a country where things happen differently. There's a magic air, there's an energy. It shows the revolutionary ideas, and it kind of puts them all together to not say that America is one or the other, but because of all of these things, it is the country that it is. And I think that that is so important, that it doesn't just end up on a note of like, America, fuck yeah, like it's this country does suck sometimes, but there is a lot that would be impossible anywhere else. And I think that that was one of the most energizing things as an American reading this novel. I can't wait to get to the rest of Pynchon's works. I'm planning on reading Bleeding Edge on my trip to Colorado here in a couple of weeks, but Mason and Dixon was a reading experience like no other. I highly, highly recommend this book, even through the confusing parts, through the difficulty of the writing style. It will pay off tenfold if you just immerse yourself in this work and find yourself at the end of such a beautiful story of not only the Mason and Dixon line, but the Mason and Dixon friendship as well. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks for watching me ramble on my first video back in quite some time. I'm out of practice, but I hope my love for this novel came through regardless. I'm planning on posting a couple more videos in the next couple of months to recap the books I've read over the last 7 months or so, just because it's been a while. But if you have any questions on the novel or have any questions for me, just leave them in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Merca!